Today I'm interviewing Miss Laurenton. What are the top 3 social rules?
I think in general, the top 3 social rules would revolve around respecting yourself, respecting others in treating them the way that you would want to be treated, and respecting property and the environment.
What are the consequences if they break that rules?
I think that depends on the circumstance. I think if there's laws related to the rules, then there is a court-imposed consequence. I think if it's school, then there's different kind of consequences that we'll probably cover in further questions, but I think it's hard to say a specific consequence because they're so broad categories that it sort of depends on what the infraction is.
Mm-hmm. Do you think the dress code is appropriate?
I would say for the most part, yes, the dress code is appropriate.
Is there anything you would like to change?
I think if I were going to change the dress code, I might redo it with students' perspective like they did the first time when they invented it, but also just because I think there's some fashion trends now that might sort of violate the spirit of the dress code, but because they weren't fashion trends when we made the dress code 10 years ago, they're not really represented in the dress code. So I think I just sort of modernize the dress code to represent some of the trends we see today in fashion.
How do you handle the student that does not follow the dress code?
I would speak to the student about the dress code and what it is they're wearing that doesn't follow the dress code. I would ask them if they have something else to wear to put on, or I would get them something else to wear. If they don't do that, then I would tell the administration and then they would follow up. There have been times where the student doesn't have anything to wear and we don't have anything else for them, so there have been rare circumstances where, say, I've taken a student to their house so they can get changed for something that does follow the dress code.
So you send them home to change?
Right, yes. Send them home to change would be an option as well.
Okay. What is the process when a student uses unacceptable behaviors?
I think in general, it varies from teacher to teacher, but I think in general, I would try to speak to them about what the behavior was that's unacceptable and what they should be doing that would be the appropriate thing. I think whatever behavior we're seeing from a student is them trying to meet a need, and so I think trying to identify what that need is and then what a socially appropriate way in a classroom to meet that need would be to give them that appropriate option would be something I would try to do. If I talk to them and they keep doing the unacceptable behavior, like they're just not at the point where they can change that, then I would implement some sort of consequence depending what the circumstance was. Like if it's something related to the cafeteria, well, maybe they lose their ability to use the cafeteria for a day or something like that. Like it depends on what the misbehavior was. And then I also might contact their parents depending the severity of the offense and tell admin as well.
When do you talk to the parents about it?
See, I shouldn't have said that one in the last question. I would say I would talk to the parents of a student sometimes when they've done something inappropriate that I think their parents should know about. So like if they've displayed a behavior that isn't appropriate for school and I've talked to them about it and they just don't change, then I'd probably phone the parents the second or third time that happened. If it was something super severe they did, like if they hurt another student or something where it was sort of a more severe issue, a more serious issue, then I'd probably call their parents right away the first time they did it. If a kid does something really awesome, I try to phone their parents just so that parents kind of have that balance of good news and bad news. I don't want parents to always be stressed that, the teacher only calls when, the kids are doing something inappropriate. So to try and share positive news as well as, especially parents that I do phone with negative news, I try and balance it with positive things when I can.
Is it tough to communicate with the parents sometimes?
There are circumstances, yes, when it's challenging to communicate with parents. I think from my perspective, sometimes it's just the time factor and the convenience factor because lots of parents are at work when I'm at work, and so some parents don't mind being bothered at work by school phone calls, but other parents, they just can't take phone calls during the workday. So then just trying to find a time that works to get in touch with them sometimes is a little bit tricky, or you leave messages and you have to follow up. So sometimes that's a bit tricky, but for the most part, I've found parents that I have talked to are glad they have the information they want to know, and they appreciate the call. And so I try and keep that in mind when it's tricky to deal with other parents.
Is any social rules that the student follow and it is not written on the student handbook?
That's a good question. I would say yes, there definitely are, but if you're asking for specifics, that would be a little bit trickier. I mean, in a fashion sense, there's no rules saying like guys can't wear what we consider to be girls' clothing, right? But we never see guys come to school saying a dress. You just don't see that, right? Like,
yeah.
To me, that's sort of an unwritten social rule in our culture that guys don't wear dresses. And I mean, that's a trivial example, but I think there are examples like that, especially amongst peer groups, that depending on the dynamics of your peer group, say some groups, like say kids that go to Smoker's Corner, right? You might get more pressure to participate in that or to skip class. Like that might be just a pressure you get from your friends to do something negative. So I think there are sort of unwritten social rules amongst groups of students.
Overall, are you happy with the show? Overall, are you happy with the social rules of W.C. Miller?
I would say yes. I mean, there's always anything that can be changed, can be tweaked, can be updated, but I don't think anything we develop is ever going to be perfect or comprehensive enough to cover every sort of situation. So I think the rules that we have are broad enough that they deal with most things, and then those things that don't fall in those categories, then we sort of sort out individual one-on-one solutions for those issues, and I would say for the most part it works pretty well.
Thank you.
Thanks.